I hadn't been following the case then, but all weekend it sort of stayed in my mind. And I texted Graydon Carter, who ran Airmail magazine, and Graydon said, "Sure, go on out for us. We'll pay your bills." And I went out there, not really just to report on it, but I thought I'd been a former Times reporter, put on my trench coat. I go out there and I'll try to solve the case. Yeah. Because no one had gotten to the bottom of things. So I get there. I'm there for like a couple of days, and I think, I pay your bills. And I went out there, not really just to report on it, but I thought I'd been a former Times reporter, put on my trench coat. I go out there and I'll try to solve the case. Yeah. Because no one had gotten to the bottom of things. So I get there. I'm there for like a couple of days, and I think, I've got this figured out, because the house is sort of in a gully. There's houses around it. I would figure someone from one of those houses, one of the areas, would see these kids. They're full of ebullience, exuberance, beauty, and he'd feel on the outside of things, and that would have sent him sort of ragefully.
So before we even get into the theories that you lay out in the book, which I find are fascinating, I think a big question is, and I was surprised by it too, why publish a book about this before the trial?
It's a very good question, something I gave a lot of thought to. What I've done, and this is my 16th book, I was reporter at the New York Times, I wrote for Vanity Fair as a contributing editor for a lot of years, and what I do is I tell true stories, but I tell stories. And I think this is an important story with a beginning, a middle, and an end right now. The subtitle of the book is The Requiem for the Idaho Student Murders, and it's a story that's supposed to be a loving remembrance of these children. An important story with a beginning, a middle, and an end right now. The subtitle of the book is The Requiem for the Idaho Student Murders, and it's a story that's supposed to be a loving remembrance of these children who've lost their lives. It's also a police thriller in many ways, a procedural of how the police caught this man, and it's really an answer to a puzzle of what happened. And I'm able to tell it really as a cross-country journey that the father and son take. And in this journey, where I was able to get some new information, I lay out a story that aspires to be a narrative that people can enjoy. So I thought now's the time to write about it.
Let's talk, really did do this, who he was targeting. What can you tell us about that?
Well, first, emphasize what you said. It's my theory, my suspicion. Right. Emphasize what you said. It's my theory, my suspicion. Right. The prosecution and the defense, one of the few things they agree on is that there is never any interaction between Kohberger, either in person or on social media, with any of the victims. I say that's perhaps not so true. If one looks at the course of what happened that night, Kohberger enters the house on the second floor through the kitchen sliding door. There are two bedrooms right adjacent to the kitchen. He could have gone into either of those bedrooms. Instead, he pursues, as if a man on a mission, up a narrow staircase and goes into Maddie Mogan's bedroom. He finds inside that bedroom not just Maddie, but Kaylee. He had really no idea that Kaylee was there. She's not really living in the house anymore. She's up in north in Coeur d'Alene. She was getting ready to graduate, and she's doing an internship there. So I believe that he had, at one point, in the Mad Greek restaurant where he would go for, which is in downtown Moscow, he goes there for vegan food. He met Maddie, didn't even have to talk with her. He was a man who was prone to obsessions, his heroin addiction, his decision to lose 125 pounds, his decision to go from a low-ranking community college to a top-ranking graduate school in criminology. He threw himself into things. And for some reason, her beauty, her exuberance, her vitality, her blondness even, that attracted Brian Kohberger, I believe. A killer needs two things, someone to love and someone to hate. Two things, someone to love and someone to hate. And either he loved the image that she projected so much and hated himself for being on the outside of it, or he hated her and felt she was a constant rebuke to everything that he was trying to become.
Why do you say that? Because first of all, to back up and to be clear, you're not suggesting that anybody who has some sort of drug addiction will have an obsession with a person, right? They might have an addiction to a drug. Doesn't mean they're obsessed with. There's something specific about something about Koberger.
An obsessive personality.
Okay.
I think you can see a pattern of a personality that falls into a pattern of a personality that falls into obsessive beliefs, obsessive behavior, and that's been the story of that falls into obsessive beliefs, obsessive behavior, and that's been the story of his life. And for whatever reason, and I wish I could speak with him. I'd like.
Have you tried?
I've tried everything. It's pretty hard to get to Brian Koberger right now.
While this is legal cases going
on. And I don't think he's allowed to by the gag order.
Right.
Welcome back to my mental health and crime channel. My name is Huda London. This is for educational purpose only. I'm a licensed cognitive behavior therapist, that's a CBT therapist, and a licensed mental health counselor. Please like, share, and subscribe if you enjoy the contents in this channel. Today, I'd like to talk about the Idaho quadruple that took place on the 13th of November, 2023. And I would specifically like to talk about the book that Howard Blum has written that has actually been talked about by many mainstream news lately. I believe the book was published today. I find that completely, this is my personal meaning and opinion, I find it to be unprofessional, unmindful. Mr. Blum said that he has written, this is his 16th book, I believe, and he used to work for the Times, Vanity Fair, and he was doing the articles for the Airmail since the beginning of this case. Now, for someone to have published 16 books that were bestsellers, some of them, I can't understand why he would think that it's all right, professional, fair for the victims' families, for Brian Christopher Koberger to get a fair trial, that it's actually all right for him to publish this book. Just like he said, in every case or in every story, because that's what he is writing, is a story, there's a beginning, there's a middle, and the end. We are hardly in the beginning of this case. We're not even in the middle of this case. The trial hasn't started, but yet Mr. Blum thinks it's all right, that it's professional, that it's okay to publish this book. We are not even in the middle of this case, like I just said. How would it be normal to write a book at the beginning of this case when this case is actually on a gag order? So if he got any information that will be most likely not facts, and those information could be actually illegal because the case is on a gag order. He actually said that he got this information before the gag order was put on this case. That means the police did not gather all the evidence yet, so that would be speculations. He said that he writes stories, sometimes true stories. Now, what is the meaning, the definition of a story? A story is an imaginary event. Sometimes it has fictional characters, sometimes it has real people in the stories. But when a case hasn't been or hasn't started yet, it hasn't began, the evidence hasn't even been handed over, we can clearly see the prosecutor and the defense attorney and Taylor go on each other's throats for the last year because the defense attorney doesn't believe that she has received all the evidence that the police and the FBI has gathered. She wants to know how Brian Christopher Kohlberger has been traced to these crimes and has been arrested for these crimes. For her to find that out, she needs all the facts and all the evidence. But yet you have Mr. Blum, the author, saying that he wore his trendy coat and he went down to Moscow, Idaho to investigate the case and to figure out if he could solve this case. This case is not supposed to be solved by authors, by the public, or anyone else. This is a case that is supposed to be solved by the detectives investigating this case, by the FBI. They have to put all the pieces in together in the puzzle and try to create not only a theory, factual theory of how this all points out to Brian Christopher Kohlberger. So now we have Mr. Blum talking about he believes that Maddie was the target, although, mind you all, law enforcement and the prosecutor, the defense attorney, he said clearly, do not believe that Brian Christopher Kohlberger knew the 4 victims. We have one of the parents of the 4 victims, the G family. Steve G clearly said that he does not believe in what Mr. Blum has been saying. He's mentioned that before this book even. And I don't think that's fair to any of these victims that Mr. Blum publish his book now when the case is not even halfway through. When somebody is actually writing a storytelling, when you're writing stories, that is not the facts. That is alleged. That is all in his head. That is all in his opinion. This is not truth-based. So for him to just publish this book is going to taint the jury pool, I believe. This is going to tamper with the case. Many thousands and millions of the people, the public, watch this case, and nobody yet knows who's going to be selected to be part of the jury pool. We don't even know if this case is going to be changed to another venue, another court venue. So for Mr. Blum to be doing all this, I find it personally to be very unprofessional, unmindful. You should be mindful that the parents need the correct justice for their 4 victims. Brian Christopher Kohlberger's parents need the correct justice, a fair justice for their son, because up to today, we don't see clear facts. Although this case is on gag order and all the facts hasn't come out yet, still, there is not much that's pointing out clearly to Mr. Brian Christopher Kohlberger has done these crimes by himself. What I'm trying to say is we can't have a biased jury. We can't have a tainted jury. We can't have a case that is tampered with. And for all those things to fall in the correct order, there's a reason that the Moscow, Idaho Police Department put this case on a gag order. I personally don't believe it's the reason that we believe that they want to keep this case safe and out of the public's eyes till it goes to court. I don't believe so. I believe that there's so many loopholes that they know that there will be so many questions lingering on, factual questions, interesting questions, important questions, that they decided to put this whole case on a gag order, just like the 911 call. They put that on a gag order because I personally believe if the 911 call was released, it would have clearly proven that there are other people allegedly involved in this case. For the surviving roommates to have taken 8 to 9 hours to call 911, and mind you, before they called 911, they called Hunter Johnson, a friend of E, to come and try and open the door, something which which doesn't make sense for me, because I've said from the beginning of this case that I personally believe, and it looks most likely, that E. Chapin was found at the corridor towards Xana's room, because when the police opened the door, they saw Xana lying on the floor. They did not say exactly where they found E, but the forensics, if you pay attention to the forensics, the places they were taking the pictures were, they took several pictures and they were bending down on their knees and taking pictures. You could see the flash cameras go off at the corridor. That's why I believe E must have been running to warn Xana to lock her room, and it was too late. So whether it was BK or whether it was other people who did this horrific crimes, I don't believe that E was found on the bed, like some YouTube creators have said. I doubt that. We've heard from many mainstream news channels that E was found at the corridor. And when I go back and look at Howard Blum, his interviews with Nancy Gray, Megyn Kelly, Law and Crime Sidebar, and many other mainstream news medias, it just looks like this is the narrative the media wants to put forth. They're trying to push this narrative because they can see that the public are adding two and two together, and we can see that possibly Brian did not do this, or maybe he is involved in this with other people. So I think this is so unprofessional, so heartbreaking, that somebody could come for their own selfish purpose, like the Airmail article offering Howard Blum the chance to come and mingle himself in an investigation that is active, and he's pretending like we've already come to the end of the case. We've had the president, Scott Green, publishing his handbook about how he handled this investigations and all at the most crucial time, which I don't understand what Scott, the president, Scott Green, has to add. Because let's start with all the students who love to go home on Thanksgiving. What if the real people who were behind these deals went, mingled in, and left the university while the investigation was going on? We have people like Jack Showalter, who drove 5.5 hours to his parents' cabin in Boise, Idaho. So this doesn't really make sense to me from the beginning. Once a case like this happens, which is so unique and so rare, a quadruple case, wouldn't it be right and wouldn't it be smart for them not to have let any of the students go home? Although I do understand, especially as a licensed mental health counselor, that these students needed moral support, they needed emotional support, they needed to go to where they feel safe, because clearly the suspect wasn't caught for 7 weeks, 6.5 weeks. So they would feel safer, obviously, at home, and their parents would have felt more safer having their children at home. But then there are 4 innocent victims who lost their lives, 4 precious souls. What happens to them getting the correct justice? And what happens to Brian Christopher Koberger getting a fair justice when everyone was scattered like kettles? They were allowed to go home. They were allowed to do as they please. And we remember there was so much going on at the university when all this was taking place. Some students went home for Thanksgiving. There were many students who were complaining about different things. There were 2 young girls who said that while they were going to the car that a guy was following them and he tried to open the car door and they ran out of the car and ran out hysterical. And then the cops came. They didn't find out what happened, who it was. There was a man with a mask who was ringing at doorbell cameras, and the doorbell cam had a picture of him. So there was like so many things that were going around in the campus that it was shocking that the students were even allowed to go home. This case hasn't been handled in a professional way from the very beginning of this case. The forensic team came in without the forensic gear. They didn't have any hairnet, nothing on. They were walking in, they were sneezing, they were coughing, they were rubbing their hands on their nose, and they were going back to the scene, back to the scene without actually wearing a forensic kit until they saw all the complaints on social media and we were lashing out. What did they do? They started wearing a bit by bit of the forensic kits. There were 3 unidentified male DNAs that were found in the house. So if it wasn't the surviving roommates and if it wasn't the roommates, obviously, because they're the victims, because obviously their fingerprints would have been the first one that would have been taken, and the surviving roommates, that means there was 3 unidentified male DNAs that was found inside and outside the house. Why wasn't that investigated? We know that Ann Taylor, Beaker's defense attorney, was keeping on asking for proof of that. She was asking, and we saw the prosecutor, William Thompson, just making excuses, trying to find his way out of that, moving to the next question. Judge wasn't doing much about that either, honestly. So imagine you have 3 unidentified male DNAs found inside and outside of this house. A whole handprint, fingerprints, was found on the good vibes. A glove was found outside near the girls' bin. Inside the premises, you had that footprint of the van shoe, diamond-shaped footprint. You had so many things, but yet again, a cigarette stump was found outside the house, but we haven't heard much about it, because every time Ann Taylor asked for that, the prosecutor would hit her by saying, give us Brian Christopher Koberger's alibi, which is fair. He should have come out with his alibi. If he was completely innocent, I would have been throwing up my alibi there. But I guess his defense attorney would say, just push it back a bit till we get their side of the story, because the prosecutor all they have to go on is a white Hyundai Elantra 2011 to 2013 model, while Brian Christopher Koberger was driving a 2015 model, and then that his phone, BK's phone, was on air mode or was on flight mode or it was switched off. That is all a guess. He said he was driving around YYY Park, but then YYY Park is closed at 10 p.m. So was he just driving around there because he couldn't have been inside the park? Stargazing because it was a cloudy night? There is so many questions to be asked, but I can't understand, for the love of God, why this man, Blum, would be writing and publishing a book called When the Night Has Fallen. This is just tainting the jury. So the students who are allowed to go home, the suspects could have been part of the people who are allowed to go home. No witnesses was talking. Then you have Steve G., Kaylee's father, who wanted to put out a reward, was asking the police to put out a reward so that students and the public could come out and come out with information of what they've heard or what they've seen, but the police were against that too. It looked like from the start of this case, the police did not really want it to go into the direction that it's supposed to be going, because obviously when you put out a reward fund there, people would start jogging their memories, I believe. That did not happen. Nobody was willing to talk. I'm sure there were many people who heard what happened because this was a creaky old house. Unless they've been threatened not to talk, just like the surviving roommates. I always say that I believe that it could be either of the two. Maybe they were threatened not to talk, others they would be next. Or maybe they could have been involved, allegedly. There's so much going on in this case that it is baffling. We know that Jack D has a white Hyundai. There are many other white Hyundais around. Many students were driving white Hyundais. It could have been anyone's white Hyundai. They keep on pointing out the fact, like Howard, or was it Howard Blum, keeps on pointing out the fact that he was stalking them. No, he wasn't stalking them. He was around those areas 12 times before. It doesn't say he was inside the house or outside the house. He was around the areas. He could have been visiting a friend's in Queen's apartment. He could have been coming to this house to maybe buy rugs. If you'll understand what I mean, I can't say the D word. The reason I say that is because we have a cab driver who told the local news that he used to drive people there to buy rugs. So Brian Christopher Koberger has had the addiction of the HA class rug. So could he have come there possibly for something? We wouldn't know. We've seen, and I showed y'all, BF is Venmos she was getting payments and sending out payments. She was mostly getting payments where it was written COKE. The word, clearly. So what was up with all that? What was happening in this house, and what was the relationship between the 6 or 5 roommates who were living together? Was there some kind of retaliation from the frats, sororities? What happened to the party that Kaylee went to? I wonder if there was any rumors, any things going on there that could have gone to the wrong person. We clearly heard Jack Showalter saying they're going to get you for that, Maddie. That's when Kaylee told Maddie, what did he say to Adam? And Maddie said, I told Adam everything. So what was this all about? Why was Kaylee studying from home? Was she in fear? Did she know that something was going down? Why did Zana ask her parents to change her locks? I find that to be very interesting. How come the police did not know exactly the timeline of of Zana and E? I showed you the poster where the boy, a young man, his mother, a young student of Sigma Chi, one of the fraternity boys, his mother said that E was at the party with Zana and he texted her son at 10 past 2, between 10 past 2 to quarter past 2. And he said that he was at the Sigma Chi, but the police insisted, instead of the FBI correcting it, they still insisted that all of them were home by 1:45, which wasn't true. Zan and Kaylee came home at 1:56. We heard Alivira correcting the police and saying that it was 1:45. There's so many things that were not properly done from the very beginning of this case. The forensic team wasn't doing their job thoroughly. Let's not forget this is a small town that is not used to a quadruple, is not used to such things. Why did they ask for the FBI's help on the 17th? Even after Olivia told the police that her sister and Maddie got home at 1:56, they still did not change the timeline. What happened at the Sigma Chi fraternity party? What could have gone wrong? We heard that there was exchange, allegedly, these are speculations, that there were exchange of words with the Davids and E. The Davids and E and Zana had a fight, and E said something about David L using rods. And you'll know what that means. Steroids, basically. And when you think about all these things, it does not make sense. Make it make sense. This is not only baffling, this is so unmindful. The FBI was not invited in this case until the 17th of November. Why? These are important questions to ask ourselves. If you are in a small town and you're the chief of Moscow, Idaho, and you can see clearly that this case needs serious help. You need the Federal Bureau of Investigations. You need the agents there. Why did it take you 5 days, Chief, to ask for help? 60 agents came from the FBI, but that was 5 days later. We even saw that the detectives started expanding the crime scene right up to Queen's apartment 10 days later. Isn't that the first thing they were supposed to do? Why 10 days later? I guess they found more evidence. Just because they said that it was a targeted attack doesn't mean that this is a guy like Howard Blum is trying to tell us that BK had obsessive personality disorder, kind of. The guy was on drugs. He had addiction for that. He didn't have addiction for blonde girls the way Howard Blum expects us to believe. Those are true. Just because you had a obsessive character personality, there's a big difference. Just because he was on drugs, it doesn't necessarily mean that he was out for blonde girls. And by the way, the girl that BK took out on a date, the only girl we heard from, had light pink hair. She didn't even have blonde hair. So it's not like we don't know what girls BK likes. We don't even know if he likes girls. This is all, we are sitting here just like we are sitting and speculating as the public. The mainstream news is speculating too. Just because they have a bigger, more legit broadcast, that doesn't mean that they're right. Howard Blum could be getting some information as facts, but then he keeps on talking about BK, his father, finding out that BK could have been allegedly behind the quadruples. How would he know? Because I guarantee you that Koberger's parents and family and sisters haven't spoken to Mr. Blum. Because I'll remind you, the parents said from the start that they believe their son is innocent and he's going to prove it. And they said they feel sorry. They showed compassion for the 4 victims and their families. They said they were going to support their son. Why would they throw their son under the bus when the court hasn't even started? Yesterday, I was watching another clip from the mainstream news channels that Jason LeBron, that is BK, his first defense attorney in Pennsylvania, said clearly he wrote a statement saying that he finds it very unprofessional of Mr. Howard Blum to be writing a book when the case hasn't even started. Just exactly like I thought. And I don't think there should be rights about such things. I believe this is the perspective and the narratives that the mainstream news media and all, and especially maybe even the prosecutor, Moscow Idaho police, allegedly, maybe this is the facts, this is what they want to put out there with this book, so that we think, oh yes, it's interesting. BK did this. Yes, BK's father actually confessed that he did that. His sister actually, these are all rumors that his sister actually told the father, I think BK did it. No, there's no facts in that. And this is just on my opinion. Allegedly, something Howard Blum should be ready to recognize. It's all stories. Like he said, he writes stories. Stories are fictional events. They're imaginary. They're for entertainment purpose, not even for educational purpose. If you don't make that clear from the start, Mr. Blum, you are spreading false narratives there that could taint the jury pool. And that is not fair for the 4 victims who lost their lives. And it's not fair for their families. It's not fair for Brian Christopher Koberger or his family. And I hope they sue him. I really hope they sue him. Because there's a reason this case is on gag order. The rules should apply for everyone, not only for us. Thank you very much. I hope everyone's having a lovely day. It's been really humid in London today. It's been a lovely day, but really hot. And I'll be making more clips in my other channels, Psychology and Crime. Please like, share, and subscribe to that channel. I intend to be using that channel with most of my content. Have a lovely evening, lovely day, wherever you are. Bye. May the correct justice be served for the 4 victims and BK. If he's guilty, then he deserves what's coming to him. And by the way, we all must have seen the latest hearing. It was a short hearing. It looks like the trial is going to start in June 2025. Although I believe at the end of August or September, they're going to have another hearing for change of venue, which the defense attorney really wants that to be done. And I really believe that is fair to be done. because I don't believe Brian Christopher Koberger will get a fair trial in Latah County. Let's not forget, I personally believe that many of the people who were involved in this horrific quadruples are students. That's my opinion only. So obviously, they're going to. We even saw when Anne took the quiz, somebody came and reported her immediately for that. It's because these people don't want the truth to come out. I believe they want to just pin it on Brian Koberger. And I always say Brian Koberger could possibly be involved. I'm not saying he's innocent. I'm not saying he's guilty. I'm just saying he deserves a fair trial. Please like, share, and subscribe.